my world shattered. I was 9. I came home to a silent kitchen, my mother, Eleanor, and grandfather, Elias, waiting with grim news. My father, Arthur, was missing. He and Uncle Silas had gone hunting in the woods east of Willow Creek. Dad, realizing he'd forgotten his deer call, walked back to his truck. He was never seen again. Silas waited, worried, then hurried back, truck empty. By nightfall, Canyon County Parks Department rangers scoured the hills. The 2-week search yielded nothing, and the superintendent called it off. Mom, ever determined, kept Dad's name on the missing persons registry. Our family hired a private investigator, a sharp, retired officer from Riverton. He confirmed the grim likelihood. Dad had wandered into old, abandoned mining shafts near Whispering Pines, fallen, and was lost forever. Yet, previous searches had found no trace. The PI, however, discovered a crucial detail the rangers missed: crude graffiti in one shaft. He believed local teens who used the mine as a hangout might hold answers, but he never found them. Uncle Silas took Dad's disappearance harder than anyone. Everyone said it wasn't his fault, but he was never the same. He stayed in touch with the PI, trying to help. I didn't get the full story until much later. The years between Dad vanishing and Mom having him declared legally deceased were a painful blur of hope and heartbreak. My sister, Lily, and I constantly asked, "When is Daddy coming home?" Over time, the sorrow faded, a silent backdrop to our lives. At 22, Lily was at Canyon City College, and I worked in Stoneville. I hadn't seen Uncle Silas in years. He'd kept his distance, telling Mom I reminded him too much of Dad. So, when Mom said he wanted to meet, I was relieved. I drove to his cabin near Pine Ridge. We caught up, sharing stories and a few beers, until our conversation inevitably turned to Dad. Then, Silas made a proposal. Visit the site of Dad's disappearance. He'd found a strange comfort in walking those Willow Creek hills. At first, the idea repulsed me. It felt like slow torture. But over a year of our renewed visits, I came around. If it didn't bring closure, at least I could say I tried. We drove to Willow Creek one Saturday in May. We treated it like a regular hike, beers and cold cuts in tow. As we walked, I realized the woods weren't haunted, not literally. My childhood fear of the area, of Dad's ghost wandering, dissolved. Yet a piece of him, a memory or hope, still lingered. At Big Bear Creek, we rested. I suggested heading back, but Silas wanted to show me something. Another mile brought us to a rocky outcropping overlooking the abandoned mines. "This is where the PI checked," he confirmed, then sighed. "There's something I never told you or your mother. The last time he saw Dad, he'd been walking into one of these shafts." Silas recounted how he'd frantically searched for Dad before calling authorities. Standing on that outcropping, he'd seen a figure dressed like Dad enter a dark tunnel. He scrambled down, ran to the shaft, flashlight in hand, but found no one. He hadn't seen any graffiti, but the mine gave him a profound sense of unease. This, he explained, was his true haunting. The possibility that Dad, upon hearing his name, chose to hide, or worse, that something inside had taken him, rendering him unable to respond. I understood his silence, but told him I was glad for the truth. I assumed we'd leave, but Silas had another request. Walk down to the mine. It was part of his own ritual. I couldn't refuse. We navigated the treacherous incline, past rusted warning signs. Silas believed Dad hadn't fallen or been trapped by a cave-in. His body would have been found. Whatever happened, it happened inside that mine, unexplained. As we approached the jagged entrance, the air grew heavy, colder. Splintered wooden beams jutted like broken teeth. The place was unnaturally quiet, our footsteps loud on the gravel. Discarded tools suggested a hasty abandonment. Silas had heard rumors of flooding, but the official story was a company bankruptcy. The quick abandonment felt wrong. A few feet into the tunnel, the temperature dropped further and outside light vanished. My small keychain flashlight barely held back the darkness. I took a few hesitant steps, then turned to check on Silas. What I saw froze my blood. He stood silhouetted by the entrance, holding a gun. His hand trembled. My mind screamed, but no words came. A cold certainty settled. I wasn't safe. I ran. Silas's gunshot exploded behind me, the bullet whizzing past. I switched off my flashlight, plunging into absolute terror. More shots followed, each flash briefly illuminating the darkness. I saw the tunnel split into 3 paths. I veered out of his sight and turned my light back on, frantically searching for a hiding spot. The narrow walls of the diverting tunnel were covered in black, smeared writing, thousands of lines in an unknown language, unlike any graffiti I'd seen. I had no time to decipher it. Chambers led off the tunnel. I picked one, lunged in, and pressed myself into a corner, heart hammering. I was trapped. My ears rang from the shots. Then Silas's voice. "Come out. Sooner or later, I'm going to find you." I couldn't move, couldn't risk a sound. His footsteps drew closer. He shone his light down my tunnel. My silent plea echoed in my head. "Don't come down here. Please, God, don't let him find me." He kept walking past. A brief hope of slipping out behind him vanished. My footsteps would be too loud. I stayed still, listening. His mumbling grew clearer, but then his steps changed. Sharp, quick, a scrape of gravel. Silence. He'd stopped. "I know you're here, Arthur." Terror fractured my mind. Arthur was Dad's name. Silas had lost his mind. I wanted to reason, to appeal to kinship, but he'd tried to kill me. I resigned myself to rushing him. Then, we both heard it. Rocks shifting deeper in the tunnels. Silas stopped muttering. A rush of warm air swept through the tunnel. It smelled like evil, like burning death. A foul, unnatural scent. I clamped my shirt over my mouth and nose, thinking of toxic gases. Then, Silas screamed, "He's here! I brought him! I did what you asked!" His screams intensified, degenerating into pure pain and terror. I seized the moment, running back the way I came, out of the mine. His screams echoed faintly behind me, then abruptly ceased. I didn't look back. I ran until my legs gave out, then walked to my truck. My hands trembled as I sat, unable to process the horror. I felt no victory, only a numb resignation. I had to report my own attempted murder. I only made it to Willow Creek before pulling over. My hands shook as I asked a motel receptionist to use their phone. I told the dispatcher my uncle tried to kill me at the abandoned mining pit north of Whispering Pines, and that I thought he'd had an accident inside. 2 rangers arrived. I told them everything. They found footprints and shell casings, but no Silas. The search mirrored Dad's disappearance. No blood, no body, no weapon. I explained the warm air and Silas's screams. Weeks later, the park superintendent announced their conclusion: a gas blowout. They believed Silas was hit with a highly concentrated CO2 cocktail, causing disorientation and leading him to attack me. He became the prime suspect in Dad's disappearance, especially given his bank account inactivity. The superintendent was keen to understand why Silas had called me Arthur. More than 2 decades have passed. No trace of Silas or Dad has been found. The mine was sealed with explosives, but I don't believe it was a CO2 rush. I told them the warm air happened after I was hiding, before Silas started calling for Dad. They dismissed it as fear-induced disorientation, but I know what happened to me. And I know what happened to Uncle Silas. I'm just not ready to say it, and I don't think I ever will be. Among the shadowy hollows of 19th century Royal Virginia, a series of terrifying occurrences would come to etch themselves into American folklore as some of the most sinister ever recorded. It was a force of malevolence so palpable, so relentless, that it claimed a life, drove a family to the brink of madness, and left a legacy of fear that lingers in the air of Blackwood County to this day. But the force in question was no mere ghost story whispered around campfires. She was a woman who actually existed, and over time, her deeds and devilry would earn her the nickname, the Shadow Brook Witch. This is not a tale of vague apparitions or spurious sightings. This is the true account of a presence so vile, it defied explanation. A nightmare that clawed its way into reality and refused to let go. The Harper family, consisting of Jonathan Harper Sr., his wife Martha, and their 9 children, had settled into their sprawling farmstead in 1804. They had since carved out a life of relative comfort amid the untamed beauty of the Virginia frontier. For more than a decade, their days were marked by the rhythm of toil and harvest, the creak of wagon wheels, and the laughter of their many children. But in the summer of 1817, everything changed. It began with a knock on the cabin walls, sharp and insistent, like knuckles rapping on the other side of the grave. The family dismissed it, claiming the sound was the result of wind on a loose branch, or perhaps a rustling animal. But then came the scratches, clawing at the windows, as if something begged to be allowed inside. Night after night, the sounds grew louder, more deliberate, until the Harpers could no longer deny them. Jonathan Harper Sr., a hardy, no-nonsense farmer with a stoic demeanor, was the first to glimpse their vile visitor in the flesh. While walking through his cornfield one sweltering afternoon, he suddenly froze as a grotesque creature seemingly materialized before his eyes. He saw a dog-like beast with the head of a rabbit, its eyes glinting with a feral and unnatural hunger. In an instant, he shouldered and fired his musket. But as the shot echoed across the field, the canine creature vanished into thin air, leaving only the stench of sulfur and a creeping dread in its wake. That night, the knocking returned, fiercer and angrier than before, as if the beast had followed Jonathan Sr. home. The children began to see things too. Sarah, Jonathan's youngest daughter, wept as she described a girl in a green dress, swinging from an oak tree, her neck twisted at an impossible angle. While Thomas, one of his sons, swore a bird of monstrous size had flown down and perched itself atop the family barn before staring at him with eyes that burned like fire and brimstone. Over time, the disturbances escalated with a ferocity that turned the Harper family cabin into a crucible of terror. Furniture shook violently, while bed covers were ripped from sleeping bodies by invisible hands. Chains rattled across the floorboards, dragged by no discernible force. And the sightings of strange animals continued unabated. Then came the voices. They were mere whispers at first, hissing through the walls, followed by a raspy, guttural tone that seemed to claw its way up from the deepest circles of hell. "I am Alara," they declared. Suddenly, things started to make sense to old Jonathan Harper. Alara Thorne had been the name of a deceased local woman rumored to have once cursed him over a land dispute. Yet, whether it truly was her spirit or something far older masquerading in her name, no one could say. However, what was clear was that the spirit spoke with a clarity that chilled the Harper family's blood, mocking them, revealing their deepest secrets, and taunting them with hints of horror yet to come. Little Sarah Harper, just 12 years old at the time, became Alara's favored target. The witch poured her wrath upon her with a cruelty that defies comprehension. Invisible fists pummeled her fragile frame, leaving bruises and welts that bloomed like dark flowers across her skin. Her hair was yanked into knots, so tight that it drew blood. Her screams swallowed by the night as the witch's ethereal voice cackled in delight. "You'll never know peace," it snarled, pinning her to the bed with a weight no human could lift. The family watched, helpless, as Sarah's bright spirit withered under the relentless assault. Her eyes grew hollow, and her voice was reduced to a mere whimper as the witch continued to deny her any rest. Neighbors flocked to the farm, drawn by tales of the disturbances, only to flee in terror as the witch turned its malice on them. It twisted up their insides, causing unimaginable pain, while hurling objects and shrieking curses that echoed through the trees. The witch might have targeted his children for particularly cruel torment, but it was the family's patriarch, Jonathan Sr., who bore the brunt of the witch's ultimate vendetta. She vowed to destroy him, and she pursued her goal with a sadistic and satanic zeal. His health unraveled as the haunting intensified. His tongue swelled inexplicably, choking off his words. His face twitched with spasms that contorted into a mask of agony, while his limbs seized as if controlled by some cruel and malevolent mistress. The witch taunted him endlessly, her voice a venomous hiss in his ears. "I'll take your life, Jonathan Harper, and I'll dance on your grave." Eventually, on December 20th, 1820, after 3 years of relentless torment, Jonathan Sr.'s body finally failed him. He was found lifeless in his bed, having passed in his sleep, with a vial of strange, foul-smelling liquid beside him. The family later confirmed it was poison, supposedly fed to him by the witch. The state of Virginia recorded Jonathan's death as the only one officially attributed to a supernatural entity, a grim testament to the power of old Alara Thorne, as well as the entity with which she'd compacted. Even General Andrew Jackson, the fearless military leader and future president, proved unable to withstand the Shadowbrook Witch's fury. In 1819, he and his men camped on the Harper family's farm, eager to confront whatever entity inhabited the place. But as their wagon approached, its wheels locked inexplicably, and the air filled with a deafening, hair-raising shriek. "I'd rather face the British Army than spend another night here," Jackson reportedly declared, fleeing before dawn with his troops in tow. If a man of his conviction was left quaking before the witch, what hope did a family of simple farmers have against it? The witch's reign of terror didn't end with Jonathan's death. It lingered, tormenting Sarah and the surviving Harpers until 1821, when it abruptly announced its departure, but not without promising to return after 7 years. And true to its word, it reappeared in 1828, shaking beds and whispering threats to Martha and the remaining children before vanishing again. It vowed another return in 1935, 107 years later. And although no widespread haunting materialized, locals in Adams Creek insist the entity never truly left. Strange lights flicker in the woods. Disembodied screams pierce the silence of the night. And the Shadowbrook Cave, a long limestone hollow near the original farm, still undulates with an energy that drives visitors to the brink of sanity. Upon visiting the Shadowbrook Cave, foolhardy visitors are greeted by what amounts to a gaping maw, its jagged walls glistening with slime and damp, while the air remains thick with a clawing and deeply unsettling stench. Those who brave its depths report footsteps echoing where no one walks, growls rumbling from the shadows, and a suffocating sense of being watched. In 1986, 2 reporters from the Virginian Post planned to spend a night inside, armed with skepticism and flashlights. Yet staff writer Michael Davies, and staff photographer Beth Miller lasted mere hours before bolting, driven out by guttural noises that swelled into a roar, a sound no cave should make. It was a short, powerful burst of sound that reverberated from the back of the cave and hit us like a slap, Davies later wrote. It was not a metallic screech or the howl of wind. It was a vocal, loud, high-pitched scream. And we looked at each other, got through that gate, and quickly left the cave behind us. Of course, logically speaking, we frightened ourselves with our imaginations, Davies continued. Or someone very much alive and human, frightened us for fun and profit. Those are the reasonable explanations. But on the night in question, with my scalp tingling and my hair rising, our fear seemed reasonable. Common sense. Davies and Miller seemed convinced that what they'd encountered was real. But was it actually the Shadowbrook Witch? And if so, what exactly is she? Many theories abound. Some call it Elora Thorne's vengeful spirit. Others, a poltergeist fueled by Sarah Harper's adolescent turmoil. Yet some believe a demon masquerading as some kind of spirit is to blame. Science offers tepid explanations. Heavy metal poisoning might well account for Jonathan's symptoms, while mass hysteria seems to amplify and explain the rest. Yet such scientific theories fall flat against the hundreds of witnesses, from neighbors to clergy to General Jackson himself, who saw, heard, and felt the Shadowbrook Witch's wrathful presence. And surely no such hoax could sustain such terror for decades, nor would one be capable of leaving such a lasting scar on such a close-knit community. Today, the Harper family farm is long gone, but the Witch's Cave remains a pilgrimage site for thrill seekers and paranormal investigators alike. Every creak of the trees, every unexplained shadow carries the echo of old Elora Thorne's mysterious malice. Locals speak of her in hushed tones, wary of invoking her name lest she turn her gaze their way. The Shadowbrook Witch is no campfire tale to be shrugged off at dawn. It's a wound in the fabric of reality, a reminder that some evils don't fade, they simply wait for their next victim. And in the stillness of the Virginia night, when the wind dies and the darkness presses close, you might hear it, a faint knock, scratch, or whisper, which promises that the tale of the Shadowbrook Witch is far, far from over. You know that feeling? That perfect, breathless moment when you look at someone and just know? That was us. Me and Amelia. We'd found each other in the chaotic hum of New York City, two souls unexpectedly quieted by the other's presence. Our apartment, a cozy space overlooking the urban sprawl, was our sanctuary, and our favorite ritual? Saturday mornings, slow and easy, making pancakes, the city's distant roar a muted lullaby. This particular Saturday, the sunlight poured through the window, painting stripes across our kitchen floor. Amelia, her laughter bright and carefree, was flipping a pancake a little too high. "Show off," I teased, stealing a piece of bacon. She swatted playfully at my hand, her skin warm against mine. But as she turned back to the stove, a subtle shift caught my eye. Her movements, usually so fluid, seemed to hold a fraction of a second's hesitation, like a tiny pause in a familiar melody. I dismissed it, probably just the early hour. Later, as we settled onto the sofa, sharing coffee and a worn copy of a graphic novel, I wrapped my arm around her. Her head rested against my chest, her breathing soft and even. Everything felt right, perfectly in place. Then, an odd sensation, a prickling, almost like tiny vibrations, against my arm where it rested beneath her back. It was faint, barely there, but persistent. I shifted, trying to get comfortable. "You okay?" she murmured, without looking up from the page. Her voice was slightly deeper than usual, a richer timbre. I attributed it to morning grogginess. "Yeah, just a weird tickle," I replied. I felt her hand, resting on my stomach, subtly clench. A shiver ran through me, not from cold. Her skin, which had been warm from sleep, now felt cooler. Not cold, but unnaturally neutral, like it wasn't radiating any heat at all. "Must be the old springs in the sofa," she whispered, her fingers tracing a pattern on my shirt. The movement was slow, deliberate, almost too careful. As the day wore on, small things began to accumulate, tiny cracks in the perfect picture. Amelia's gaze would occasionally drift, becoming distant, unseeing, even when I was talking to her. Her smile, while still beautiful, seemed to hold a newfound stillness around the edges, like it was carefully placed. And that scent, a faint, almost metallic aroma, like rain on old stone, started to cling to her. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just the city air or perhaps the new plants she'd brought home. That evening, we decided on takeout and a movie. As I reached for the remote, Amelia gently took my hand. Her touch was firm, almost gripping. Her eyes, those beautiful brown eyes I adored, seemed darker now, holding an odd, assessing intensity. "Leo," she said, her voice a low murmur that seemed to hum from within her. "Do you ever feel connected to everything?" I laughed, a little uncomfortably. "Deep thoughts for a Friday night, babe. What do you mean?" She didn't laugh back. Her fingers, which were now interlaced with mine, felt strangely ridged, not rough, but as if something was forming beneath her skin. And that metallic scent was stronger now, mixed with something earthy, like fresh soil. Her smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. Those eyes, I realized with a jolt, weren't just dark. There was a faint, almost imperceptible gleam deep within them, like polished obsidian reflecting distant light. "Connected," she repeated, her grip tightening until it was almost painful. Like the roots of a tree, reaching, burrowing, feeling the pulse of the earth, the stillness beneath the skin. A cold dread seeped into my bones. Her words weren't just poetic. They felt literal. I tried to pull my hand away, but her grip was unyielding. Her face, inches from mine, was calm, almost serene. But those gleaming eyes held something ancient, something unhuman. "Amelia," I whispered, my voice thin. "What are you talking about?" Her smile broadened, stretching a fraction too wide, too slow. "I'm talking about growth, Leo," she purred, and the sound was accompanied by a faint, grinding noise, a soft rasp from within her. "About becoming, about transcending this." With her free hand, she gestured vaguely around the apartment, at our life. As she spoke, I felt it, a tremor in her hand that wasn't shaking, but something internal, organic, a subtle, internal shift. And then, faintly, through the skin of her palm, I felt a distinct, undeniable pressure. A small, hard point, like a tiny pebble, pushing against my flesh. It felt like a new knuckle, or something growing from within. My breath hitched. I scrambled back, pulling with all my might, finally breaking free from her grip. I stumbled away, knocking over a lamp. Amelia remained on the sofa, unmoving, her serene smile unwavering, her gleaming eyes fixed on me. The metallic, earthy scent filled the room, now undeniably stronger, sharper. "Where are you going, my love?" she asked, her voice calm, but the undercurrent of that deeper timbre, that strange internal grinding, sent a spike of terror through me. "We're just beginning to really get acquainted." I didn't answer. I just ran. I ran out of our sanctuary into the blare and chaos of the city, leaving behind the woman I loved and the unsettling, growing stillness that now resided beneath her skin. I haven't been back, I can't, because in those final moments I saw something in her eyes that told me Amelia wasn't just changing, she was blooming into something ancient, something terrifying, and I knew, with a horrifying certainty, that if I stayed, I would bloom too. Let me tell you something that might ruin late-night subway dates forever. You know that feeling when something seems fine on the surface, normal even, but deep down your gut is screaming that something's wrong. That's what happened to me and Evan. We'd been dating about 6 months. Things were still new, exciting. We were in New York for the weekend. My idea. I'd always dreamed of riding the subway late at night, like they do in the movies. Quiet, dim lighting, the whole train to ourselves. A little urban adventure. So, after dinner and drinks, we hopped on the A train around midnight, heading uptown. It was nearly empty, just a few tired commuters and a guy playing music too loud on his phone. We sat in the far back, just talking, joking, stealing kisses like teenagers. Somewhere after 145th Street, the train emptied out completely. No one left but us, Perfect, right? We didn't notice how long we'd been riding, lost track of time, lost in each other. When we finally pulled apart and looked up, the train had stopped. No sound, no station name on the wall, just flickering fluorescent lights and gray tile outside. We looked at each other. I laughed nervously. Did we miss our stop? Evan pulled out his phone. No service. I checked mine. Dead. The doors didn't open. We waited. 2 minutes passed, then 3. He stood up, walked to the window, and squinted. I think we're between stations. But the weird thing, there was a sign outside. Not a name, just 3 words. Do not exit. Painted in red, faded, like it had been scratched into the tile. We both looked at each other like, what the hell? Then the lights inside the train went off, not all at once, one by one, starting from the front car. Each click of a light shutting down echoed like a footstep, getting closer. We stood there, frozen, just listening. Click, click, click. The last light above us flickered, then went dark. Total silence. Evan whispered, "This isn't right." Then we heard it. Not footsteps. Breathing. Slow. Wet. From the other end of the car. I don't know how long we stood there before Evan grabbed my hand and yanked the emergency door release. We stumbled out into the tunnel. Complete darkness, except for that red painted message glowing faintly behind us. Do not exit. We ran, following the tunnel in the direction we thought was south. The air felt thick, like breathing through wet fabric. Every few steps, we'd hear that breathing again. Not chasing, just nearby. Eventually, we saw light. An old service exit stairwell. We burst through the door, climbed for what felt like forever, and came out in the middle of Red Hollow Station. Here's the thing though. Red Hollow's been abandoned since 1977. There's no official record of it ever reopening. No trains stop there. Not even the A-line. And when we finally found a cop outside and told him what happened, he just stared at us and said, "People don't come out of Red Hollow." Then he walked away. You ever get that feeling like you're being watched? Even when you're sure no one's there. I used to think people made that stuff up. Now, I'm not so sure. This happened to me and my boyfriend Darren about 6 months ago. We live in a suburb outside Sacramento, California. Not exactly a scary place. Pretty normal, quiet, Target and Subway on every corner kind of vibe. But that night, It was anything but normal. It was a Friday. We'd been dating a year and wanted to do something simple. Grab burgers, see a movie, nothing fancy. We picked this little theater tucked behind a shopping center. It was older, kind of run down, but they had midnight showings of classic horror movies, and that night it was The Thing. I'm a sucker for old school horror, so I was all in. The theater was maybe a third full, mostly other couples, a few loner horror geeks. You could tell it wasn't a chain. The screen had a crease in it. The seats squeaked if you shifted your weight, and the projector made this low, whirring sound the whole time. But honestly, that just made it better. We sat in the back, Darren's idea, of course. He always liked to joke about making out during scary movies. And yeah, guilty. Once the credits rolled and the lights stayed dim, we hung back while everyone else started to trickle out. Some people hung around the lobby. A couple guys stayed in the front row arguing about the ending, but otherwise, it got quiet quick. I was laughing about something dumb he said, when the big metal exit door slammed shut at the far end of the room. Just this loud, echoing clang that made both of us jump. We figured it was a staff guy locking up, right? We decided to head out too. We walked down the sticky steps hand in hand, still a little buzzed from soda and popcorn in each other. The whole thing felt like a late-night teen movie. You know, cheap thrills and dumb kisses. Until we got to the parking lot. Now this place didn't have a big open lot. It was one of those narrow fenced-in garages beneath the shopping plaza. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the whole place smelled like oil and old trash. You could hear water dripping somewhere, maybe a busted pipe, just constant little plink, plink, plink. Our motorcycle was parked all the way in the back. Darren loves that thing. It's this beat-up Yamaha from like 1999, but he treats it like it's his firstborn. We were walking toward it when I noticed something weird. There was a car, an old Lincoln, maybe 80s, parked in the far corner. Weird thing was, it wasn't there earlier. We'd come through the garage on foot, and I remember it being completely empty except for our bike. Now this huge boat of a car was just sitting there, tucked into the shadows. Windows tinted pitch black. No license plate. Darren didn't notice. He was busy digging through his backpack for the keys. He looked up, squinted. Nah, must have come in after us. I don't know why it bothered me. Something about the way it was parked, not centered in the spot, kind of angled, like whoever drove it didn't care, or was in a hurry. We started walking again. That's when we heard the door. A slow creak. Metal hinges straining. It wasn't the main door to the street. It was the side maintenance door. One of those unmarked ones you assume only employees use. It opened just a crack, maybe 6 inches. No one stepped out, but it stayed open. Darren noticed too. He froze. We stood there for a second, waiting to hear something. Footsteps, voices, anything. Nothing. I whispered, "Let's just go." He nodded and we kept walking, faster now. I kept my eyes on the car as we passed it. The windows were still black, no sign of anyone inside. Until I heard the softest knock, like a fingernail tapping glass. It came from the back window. I stopped. Darren didn't hear it. He was already on the bike, kicking the starter. I turned, looked back. The door was still cracked open. The Lincoln was still there. But now I swear I saw someone in the back seat. Just the outline, a shape leaning slightly forward. I don't know how to explain it, but my stomach dropped. Not because it was a person, but because they weren't moving, just sitting there, watching. "Babe, come on," Darren shouted over the engine. I snapped out of it, ran over, jumped on behind him, and we sped out of there so fast the tires screeched. When we hit the street, I looked back. The garage lights flickered and then went out completely, like someone flipped a switch. We didn't talk much on the way back to my place. I think we both felt it, that weird weight, like we'd walked too close to something we weren't supposed to see. I didn't sleep that night, not really. A couple weeks later, I tried to tell my friend about it. She laughed, said it was probably a homeless guy sleeping in the car. That old theater was always sketchy. But here's the thing. I went back the next weekend to see another midnight show. Psycho this time. The theater was closed. I don't tell this story often. Honestly, I think most people wouldn't believe me, and I get it. It sounds small, even silly when I try to explain it. But that night, I really thought I wasn't going to make it out. It happened about 4 months ago. I live in Colorado Springs. My husband, James, works overseas, does engineering work for an oil company in Norway. He's gone 6 weeks at a time, home for maybe 10 days if we're lucky. I'm used to doing the parenting thing on my own. That night, my daughter, Lily, she's 9, woke me up around 2:45 a.m. She was burning up, shaking. I've seen her sick before, but this was different. Her lips were pale, and she was struggling to speak clearly. I didn't even think. I threw on a hoodie, grabbed her coat and slippers, and drove straight to St. Luke's Hospital. It's about 10 minutes from our place. It was dead quiet when we pulled in. No one on the roads, no one in the lot. I parked on level 2 of the underground garage. The whole place had this weird hum. Those old fluorescent lights, you know. They kind of flicker and buzz. Not unusual, just cold. Like the kind of quiet you notice too much. I carried Lily into the ER and the nurses were great. They took her vitals, got her into a room right away. The doctor came in, asked a few questions, then said they needed to run some quick tests. They moved her into another room and told me I could wait outside. That's when I realized my phone wasn't in my purse. I'd left it in the car, probably right in the cup holder where I dropped it earlier. I wanted to call James, let him know what was going on, maybe text my sister. So I told the front desk I was running out real quick, and I took the elevator back down to level 2. Now here's where things started feeling off. When I stepped out of the elevator, the lights on the far end of the garage were off completely. Just a big black section, like someone had flipped the breakers for that side. My car was parked right on the edge of that dark zone, still visible, but barely. I didn't like it, but I kept walking. There was this sound, something light, like footsteps, but not quite. Too fast. Almost like someone dragging their feet, stopping when I stopped. I thought maybe it was just my nerves, lack of sleep. I walked a little faster, keys between my fingers just in case. I got to the car, opened the door, grabbed my phone. It was there, right where I left it. But then I heard it again, scuff, scuff, coming from the dark part of the garage. It wasn't loud. That's what made it worse. It was hesitant, like someone trying not to be heard, but still screwing it up. I stood completely still. I wanted to believe it was nothing. Maybe a janitor. Maybe someone else came in and parked. But it didn't feel right. You know that feeling when you know someone's watching you? That's what it felt like, right between my shoulders. I clicked my car's key fob, beep beep, just to make some noise. The sound echoed down the garage like a shotgun. And then I heard another sound, like a shuffle, followed by a very faint cough. Human. That somehow made it worse. I turned back toward the elevator, and that's when I saw the shape, just standing there, in the darkness a little off to the side, like they were waiting. No uniform, no scrubs, no reflective vest, just a person standing there. I didn't move. I don't know why. We just stood there. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. Then the elevator doors dinged behind them, and they walked away. Not toward the elevator, but deeper into the garage, into the dark. I didn't wait. I ran for the stairs. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped my phone halfway up the first flight. I didn't stop to pick it up. I ran until I got back to the ER. I told the security guard at the front desk what happened. He didn't look surprised, just nodded, said he'd check it out. That's all. He didn't ask for details, didn't ask me to describe anyone, just picked up his radio and walked away like it was nothing new. I never saw Lily's test results. They gave her fluids, monitored her for a few hours, and she stabilized on her own. No real diagnosis. We went home around sunrise. She was back to normal by noon, like it never happened. I went back to the hospital 2 days later to look for my phone. Security said nothing was turned in. A nurse found it 3 weeks later. Someone had stuffed it behind a vending machine on level 1. No cracks, no scratches, battery still charged at 40%. But my photos from that night, all gone. Just that one night. Deleted. Nothing else was touched. I never got an explanation, but I started parking on the street after that. I was 22 when I got the job. Just moved to Houston from my hometown. Nothing big, just trying to get on my feet. My cousin hooked me up with a security position at a shopping mall called Riverstone Square. Not one of the huge ones, just a mid-sized plaza with a couple anchor stores, a movie theater, and a 5-story parking structure behind it. They told me I'd be on day shift for the first 2 weeks while I trained. Then I'd rotate to nights. I wasn't thrilled. I don't mind being alone, but something about night shift, especially in a dead concrete parking garage, just feels off. But money's money, and I needed rent. Day shifts were easy, mostly walking around, checking stairwells, writing up reports. Occasionally dealing with someone sleeping in their car or a kid tagging a wall. The weirdest thing that happened was a homeless guy singing to himself on the roof level. Then the night shift started, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. The very first night, I noticed the sound, a kind of humming, not mechanical, not like a machine, more like someone murmuring, low and steady, almost like when someone talks to themselves under their breath. But every time I stopped and tried to pinpoint it, it vanished. I figured maybe I was just tired. My sleep schedule was a mess. I started bringing earbuds and podcasts to keep myself grounded. Second week of nights, I noticed something else. Elevator 3 would open by itself. Not all the time, just randomly during the night. No one inside. Nothing on the cameras. It would just ding, open, and then stay like that for a minute before closing again. Maintenance said it was just a sensor glitch. Old elevators, nothing to worry about. Still gave me a weird feeling. Then one night, my 19th shift, I remember because I'd started counting them. I saw someone on level 2 at around 3:40 a.m. There weren't supposed to be anyone there. The mall was long closed. Even the gym had shut down early for deep cleaning. I was the only staff on site. But I saw a person standing near the edge, facing the wall, not moving, just standing. I radioed in like I was supposed to, even though I knew no one would answer. Told myself it was just a loiterer or someone who'd fallen asleep and just woke up. I walked up the ramp calling out, "Security, you okay?" No response. I got closer, 20 feet maybe, and realized something was off. The person wasn't quite standing right. Their shoulders were angled too high, arms stiff like they were holding themselves up, and they were barefoot. I remember that part clearly. Their feet were pale against the dirty concrete. I stopped. They turned slightly, not all the way, just enough to see one side of their face. It was a woman, early 30s maybe, long dark hair hanging in front of her face, and she was smiling. Not a normal smile, not friendly or creepy, just fixed like it had been there too long. I said, "Ma'am, are you all right?" And she whispered something. I didn't catch it, just a hiss of syllables, not even sure it was English. I took one step closer, and the lights on the entire level flicked off, just for a second, long enough for me to lose her in the dark. When they came back on, she was gone. I ran a full loop of level 2. Nothing. Checked every camera. Nothing. I filed an incident report, but I left that part out. Just said I saw an unauthorized person and they fled. Next night, I brought coffee, extra batteries, a flashlight, and a pocket knife. Told myself I was being paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling. About halfway through my shift, around 2:30, I went into the south stairwell to do a routine check. When I opened the door, I nearly tripped. There was a pile of shoes on the landing. Men's shoes, women's, kids. All old, worn down, dusty, like they'd been taken off in a hurry. They weren't there during my last round. I looked up the stairwell. Nothing. I looked down. Still nothing. And then I heard it again. That low, murmuring sound. This time, it was close. Just a floor below. I didn't go down. I'm not proud of it, but I turned around, went back to the office, locked the door, and waited out the shift. When morning came, I wrote the full report, this time with everything. I handed it to my supervisor. He didn't even read it. He just said, "Shoes again, huh?" and tossed it in a drawer.